She's from Creative Feast, and she has a presentation filled with her own personal edible garden and some recipes and garden tricks that she'll share with us. So we also have some books out related to it if you get inspired by the end here, and we can also help you as well. I want to thank the Friends of the Public Library for bringing this program for us. We have a lot of great programs coming up too. Next Friday there's the Highwaymen. It's a presentation, more like an entertainment. Johnny Cash, all those different kind of things, so a little performance. So that'll be interesting too, so check them out. We have calendars in the back as well, and the front as well. And if you need anything, I'll be in the back here, and we're going to let Liz Barber take it up.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming this evening. It's a pleasure to be here. I have been to the library many years ago. It's been a while since I've traveled. Some of you may have had a chance to look at my website. It's thecreativefeast.com. And there you'll find recipes. You can also look at my gardens after the presentation. You can check out my edible gardens. I also have a new flock of chickens that we got in 2020 like everybody else did. And they do move through the gardens in a series of tunnels. So if you are somebody who's interested in that, there's that to look at. I used to travel with a full kitchen, and I did cooking demonstrations, which was the last time that I was here. But since 2020, I went online, and so I was offering cooking demonstrations online. I currently still offer them through AARP, so those are free to AARP members. I do them once a month on Tuesday afternoons from 2 until 3. So you can go to their website. My home is in New Hampshire, so AARP New Hampshire will have that. And if you're a member, you can register for that for free, and those are cook-alongs. And there's lots of recipes available for you. But today, I'm here to talk to you about my gardens. I am, aside from my cooking, most known for my edible gardens. I was featured this year in the Garden Conservancy Garden Tours. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're a national organization. And if you are not familiar with them and you are a gardener, I highly recommend you become a member. It's not expensive. And on certain days during the summer, all across the country, private gardeners open their beautiful gardens to the public. And you're welcome to tour them. So you can take a region of your area. So for example, you could look in your region and see what gardens are open. If you're traveling across the US, you can also check out in that area and you can tour those gardens. So you're a member?
Well, I'm not a member, but I have to tell you about my friend. Their garden here in Springfield is on that tour. And what is it? It's like...
Is it upcoming?
Next week?
Okay, so I would go to their website. You can purchase tickets. I think it's maybe $10 to get in, and I think it gets you into all. Is it all the gardens on that day in your region, or I'm not sure, but it's a wonderful organization, and it's a great opportunity for you to see gardens. My garden is an edible garden. I live in Hollis, New Hampshire, which is, if you're familiar, just above Fitchburg, and right next to Townsend. We're right by Nashua, so it's kind of tucked in there. And I live in the historic village. You're going to see my house. It's one of the oldest homes in Hollis, built in 1744. And it's on just 1/3 of an acre. And as you know, often with these antique homes, their acreage has been cut down over years, but mine was always very small. When we moved to Hollis in 1999, we had been living in Framingham, Mass. We moved to Hollis. I had a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. And on a very busy street, as often these older antique homes are, we decided we put up a picket fence, but more importantly, I had seen what was that guy's name? He used to do a garden show on PBS. I'm sorry?
Victory Garden?
Yes. And he discussed the concept of street calming measures in tight town situations. And the idea is that you layer plant material, sidewalks, flowers, different, churches may have window boxes, the library has a beautiful garden, all of those things. They attract our attention and they actually help us to slow down, to kind of look around us and to take in the scenery. So I really took that to heart. Our house, the front corner of it is about 10 feet off the road. So I decided, rather than hiding my gardens in the back of the house, I would bring them to the front of the house. So I began with layers, the picket fence. Then I dug up all of the grass in the front, and then I began to plant my gardens there with window boxes, etc. And then eventually made it all around the house. And if you ask my husband, he's actually quite happy because there's very little lawn to mow. But if you ask any gardener, once you start, you just seem to find a new place to plant every year, right? If you're a new gardener, my best recommendation to you is that you live in your space for a full season. Okay, so that you can see, where does the sun rest? Where does it rise? Where does it hit for the most part of the day? Our sun is most consistent in the front of the house. So that's where I knew I would have to plant those sun-loving vegetables and herbs and things like that. So I naturally went to a garden that combined my perennials, my annuals, my herbs together. Over the years, the design of the garden has changed, and in fact, every year it changes. For 20 years, I held an open garden tour just on my own for my students and anybody who happened to wander through. And so every year I try to give something new. For the Garden Conservancy, we created new gardens, and then we formalized the gardens in front by making more straight rows and adding some cobblestone, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been a lot of fun. I do like to say up front, I bet there are many of you who are far better vegetable gardeners than I. But the beautiful thing about being a gardener is you never have to be perfect. And if you call your garden a cottage garden, it never has to look perfect at any time, right? It's like I used to say when I was baking pies and demonstrating pies, at my various programs and online. When I created a recipe, I always called it a rustic apple pie or a rustic peach pie, because then it never had to look perfect, right? So that's the beauty. And I was just talking to my sister-in-law, who we've lived apart for many, many years, and she just said to me, "Oh, I've just started to be a gardener." And I thought, all this time, 30-something years, I always thought she was a gardener because she always had plants. It's what we define ourselves as and what we are. So I do encourage people, your gardens don't have to be big. Mine are all on 1/3 of an acre. Each of my garden spaces is actually very small. It allows me to concentrate my time for short periods of time to weed or whatever. If it takes longer to weed than it takes me to drink the glass of wine I'm holding up while I'm weeding, then that garden is just too big, right? Or a cup of coffee early in the morning, you'll find many of them throughout my garden where I've set them down, completely forgotten about them, and then my husband has to go and bring them all up. So it's a wonderful hobby to have, and never be too serious about it, and you will enjoy it. So this program that I'm going to present to you is the Edible Salad Garden, and this will help you, I hope, to see how easy it is to be harvesting from your gardens without having these grand row after row after row. You don't have to pretend you're a farm. You can enjoy a lot of edible things. I've brought you some examples. These are, of course, they're now wilted, but you'll get the idea when I show them to you. So Feel free to ask any questions throughout the program. I'm happy to stop and answer those questions for you. So this is my home. This is the Daniel Emerson house. It is a small cottage, 2,000 square feet, but it's been perfect for our family. We're very fortunate. It is original on the interior, so we're very lucky to have that. But it's situated on the lot in such a way that it allows me to have a variety of sun, shade, and as I mentioned in the back, the chickens, etc. But we are right on the road. Now this front plot that you see, as I mentioned, when we first moved there, it was all grass. And it took my husband a long time to mow because it's an odd shape. And so when I asked him if he would mind if I turned that into a garden, he had no problems whatsoever. So it has been a wonderful place to experiment. As you can see on the left, I do have a variety of vegetables mixed in. I think it offers diversity. We also look at our vegetables differently when we're planting them right in the garden. You will see how beautiful every vegetable plant is, in fact, especially when you've surrounded it with beautiful annuals that are edible as well. So your entire garden can be composed of that along with the perennials that are reliable from year to year. So this is just, a look down, and you'll see the setup changes from year to year. These are just some of my favorite photographs. In this particular example, I did do rows with cabbage and cauliflower and broccoli, and in between, in the foreground on the right, are marigolds. Marigolds are great to plant within your garden. Just remember, this is the hard thing for us gardeners in the spring. We buy all of our little 6-packs, and they are just so sweet. And we get them in, and they look perfect until they start to grow, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And our mistake is that we've planted them too close together. So in this case, they did shade out the marigolds. However, the plants themselves growing clustered together will help to keep your weeds down. So just watch what you're planting between and what the effect is that you're trying to get. In the foreground, this is where I grow my perennials. They come back year to year and fairly reliable in that sense. Now this is the north side of the house. Every part of your garden should be available to you for some kind of edible planting. There are herbs that will grow in part shade. There are greens that you can be eating in your salad that do just fine in less sun. So for example, if you want to grow lettuces and spinach, they don't need to be in the hottest full sun. They can get, much less sun throughout the day, and actually they sometimes prefer that. They do tend to prefer cooler areas, so shade will help them. So this side of the house has been, we're trying to close off this side, but also to bring in some sunlight for my herb gardens right off of the porch. This is that small herb garden there. Really, it is so small, it's probably not even 8 feet wide, but it is packed full of edibles throughout the season. When you're using edibles like lettuces and spinach and things like that, you can have multiple plantings of them, so you can plant your garden that way. You can plan that so that on one side I'll start, on the shadier side, I'll leave that until midsummer. The sunnier side, I'll plant in early spring. I do a lot of cut and come again planting. So if you're doing a heads of lettuce, you can cut off the pieces of lettuce that you want, and then it'll continue to grow until it bolts. Catch it right before it bolts. The longer your lettuce is in the ground, the closer it is to bolting, the more bitter the leaves are. So just keep those things in mind. Bitter greens, we actually pay money for those, right? Arugula is a bitter green. Kale is a bitter green. And so what do we do when we cook them or bring them to the table, we balance them with a dressing that may have balsamic vinegar in it, or maybe honey in it, or fruit juice or something. And also bitter greens are easy to remove the bitterness from simply by steaming. So if you have kale, simply steam it for 2 minutes with salted water, which will help to keep the color. Once you steam it, you've removed that bitterness. Now, one thing I will say about kale, do you remember when that was like the only thing you should eat? It was so popular. Well, that was a marketing plan for those growers who were growing kale. Kale is an excellent plant to grow in your garden because you can harvest from spring all the way through a frost. And in fact, if you allow your kale plant to go through 1 or 2 frosts, what does it do? It mellows out the flavor. So be aware that some of these plants that we're convinced are really the best for us, sometimes they need a little help. Whoever thought that we would all be craving and paying money for Brussels sprouts at a restaurant? That was not something when I was a kid that you ever thought you'd do. We've found new ways to prepare them, right? We understand that foods are being marketed to us all across, through vegetables, fruits, things like that. But this garden it gives me sun during much of the day, but also gives me somewhat shade during the morning, so that that's where I grow. My basil does best there, really lush and full. My thyme, sage, mints do very well. And then I also have on one border, I have my peonies. So I mix those all together. By the way, peony petals are edible. Okay, so that falls into your edible category. Okay, so here's the chicken coop that I told you about. The best thing that we did was, could we dim the lights? Yeah. Thank you. So the best thing that we did, and it was actually, sometimes I think my husband's not paying attention at all. And when we were thinking about chickens, I was going to put their coop kind of down behind the garage in an area that nobody would see. And he said, wait a minute, why don't we just put it right in the garden? Why don't we enjoy it? And so they are actually near our outdoor dining area. So in the evening, if we have a cocktail or something, we can just enjoy the chickens. They love these tunnels. It keeps them safe. And at the end, in the lower right-hand corner, that's actually what I call my composter. That's where I put all of my leaves, all of my weeds, all of my kitchen scraps. They make that in very quick order into mulch, and they, because they're chickens, they kick it out, and then I just go collect it and put it in the garden. So they are working for their keep, which is really nice. But yeah, these tunnels, we have, for the past couple of years, had fox who live behind in my neighbor's shed underneath. They have not attempted once to break in. I've got them on video standing on top of it, looking down. Their kids jumping over it, back and forth, playing games, and the chickens just like freeze. So it all works beautifully. So we're very fortunate.
Is this tunnel connected to anything?
It's connected to the back of the coop.
Oh, I see. It goes
And
back.
so, yeah, so there's a run. This is actually their run here. So it's just a 5x7 space, which is not large enough for the 8 chickens we have. So I just bought this black mesh and just kept making these tunnels. And so they have over 100 feet of tunnel running on both sides. So you see it on one side, but it actually goes out that side all the way down to the road. So it's a really wonderful play area for them. Now, I always like to share some fun areas of gardening that you might consider. These are my little spaces, like as I mentioned, that are small enough to work in. they don't overwhelm me when I take it section by section. These are just a variety of mescaline greens. These boards here, which are acting like mulch, right? They're keeping the weeds down. Those are actually leftover siding from when we had the house resided. So I don't throw anything away, and I just really do my best to find some kind of use for it. So these are very nice, and they actually allowed me to walk on them before I changed the whole garden plan. But you can see in the middle picture, what a beautiful bouquet these greens make for you. So having variety is not only good for our nutritional intake, but also it gets us excited about the food that we're eating. And then, of course, on the far side, that's just a beautiful head of lettuce. So for those of you who are thinking, well, my perennial beds, they're so full, consider the idea when perennials need to be split. The next time you split them, maybe you make room for these edible vegetables that then become a beautiful part of your walkway going up to the front door. And anybody who comes, they're going to stop and say, wait a minute, she's got vegetables right there. Is that something I can do? Do keep into account that, they have nutritional needs as well. So you might consider changing your mulch if you are mixing them into your perennial beds. Make sure that the mulches you use are not artificially colored or have chemicals on them. Many mulches do, so you want to move to either organic or all natural. There are many ways that you can mulch your gardens that are just fine for vegetable growing. Now this is a similar area where I had lettuces here and those boards across. I don't know if you can tell, there's a mesh structure up the back that allows for cucumbers to climb up and to shade the greens from that afternoon western sun. So by incorporating both vertical and horizontal together in your garden, growing up is a nice way to take a small space and make it very productive. Don't overwhelm yourself by going out and just creating a huge garden. Start with little places. See how many different types of visual elements that you can add in there. What I did here was I tried to create, this little box effect. These are scallions. When you go to the grocery store and you buy your scallions, have you ever noticed that they have roots? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Don't throw those away. That's what those are. I simply put those roots, I chopped off the green part and put the roots right into the ground, the bulb into the ground, and I had scallions all summer long. You can also do this just in a jar of water in a sunny window during the winter time. So that's a freebie, right? So you can do that with scallions.
I'm sorry, what town do you live in?
I live in Hollis, New Hampshire.
Massachusetts? Oh,
New Hampshire.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. Up by Nashua.
Okay, go.
Yeah. So here's another little small area vignette. Now, this is along the driveway. Everybody has different microclimates within their yard. I happen to live with blacktop going around our yard. The road goes around the yard, so that throws off heat. And then, of course, I have my driveway. The driveway is going to be a warm place. It's a great place to start spring vegetables or perennials, whatever annuals that you have. It also tends to be a place where you can't get a lot of nutrient mixed in because there's a lot of runoff on a driveway, etc. So choose plants that don't like nutrients. So nasturtium, for example, they do not like well-fertilized soil. So you don't want to put those in a fertilized area. You want to keep them where they're not going to get a lot of attention. I find herbs like thyme, that's another one. I often use thyme as a ground cover in places that it's hot and dry. They seem to do beautifully there. So consider that when you're looking around the area. I did here, we have the nasturtium in front, some cosmos on the side. At the back is Brussels sprouts, which didn't do so well for me because Brussels sprouts need to grow up nice and tall so they get that beautiful stalk. But the leaves of the Brussels sprouts are so sweet and delicious. So that was the first and last year I did them, but I treated those leaves as salad greens and it was perfect for me. The same, excuse me, with cabbage leaves also can be very sweet, especially when they're young, which is why your groundhogs and rabbits love them, right?
So what do you do with your groundhog and rabbit?
Well, that's a really good question. When the fox are in town, I don't have to worry about a thing. It's great. And we've had the fox around, we had them for the last 3 or 4 years. This year, the fox did not come back. It's interesting because in our town center, everybody had fox for about 4 years, and then all of a sudden they all disappeared. Where they went, I don't know. But the groundhog came in and took over. So, and we had bunnies the first part of the spring. So what I ended up doing after they ate all of my broccoli starts and my little cabbage starts, and I cried, I did build some mesh covers to go over them using that same wire that I used, and I had a whole bunch of it. The problem with groundhogs is that you're not supposed to take them anywhere, right? You're not supposed to, so I have friends who they'll take them out, and I don't want to know how they take them out. They take them out, and that's okay. I just can't do that. So we do have a little groundhog this year whom I have had some face-to-face discussions with. Literally, like I was picking something and I looked down and he's just looking, and he was little. And I said, you gotta go. You gotta go. And so I moved and he took off, and then I followed him, and then I just kept chasing him. So you would see me running crazy all around, and because my husband's theory is if you scare them enough, they won't come back. I don't know if that's true. We went on vacation and all of my cabbages were eaten down. But then I thought, well, maybe it's just the cabbages because he didn't go after anything else. So I'm just leaving those there, and then we'll see what happens. I haven't seen him since we've been back from vacation. Rabbits are another issue. Mine, I saw them in the spring. They saw me, maybe I scared them enough. They didn't come back. They found somewhere else.
Our rabbits aren't scared of anything.
Yeah. Now we live in a dense part of town, but there are orchards out behind us, and once they start producing, my guess is that they're very happy to be out in the orchards. So I don't know. That groundhog is still somewhere around. I just don't know where he is. He's somewhere getting bigger. That's all I know. Right?
And what is the blue over there?
So these are bachelor buttons. That's an annual. Now some of these, you can plant these seeds in the fall, and then they all come up in the spring. Now I never say no to a volunteer, either someone who wants to help weed the garden or a volunteer plant. My bachelor buttons self seeds, so that's really nice. But they are edible, and the petals are, just beautiful. They don't have a lot of flavor, but they are beautiful. They always add so nicely. Now, this is in front of the house. When the sun comes around, of course, it gets more shade from the house, the building itself. So cabbages tend to do just fine without having full sun. And the same with lettuces. So this is a great area. I've identified that as a really good area to grow my greens in, because it only gets really the hot sun from part of midday when it comes around from the south, and then late afternoon. But mostly in the morning up until about 12:30, 1 o'clock, they're in shade, so they're somewhat protected. And then here, of course, you see there's broccoli mixed in, and I've got some squash there that were volunteers. I have to be very careful because I don't have a lot of space. Growing squashes is questionable. I have to remember that it's okay to buy one squash plant. I don't have to by 6 or 8 or 10. But also because they climb, what I did these past 2 years is I planted my squash and my cucumber. Do you remember that composter for my chickens? I planted them on one side, they grew up and covered the whole composter and protected the chickens from the hot sun during the hottest part of the summer, and then I got squash from that. So using what you have is always a good idea. Now, for those of us who don't want to invest the time or the real estate in a lot of gardens in the ground, you can do this in tubs. Just make sure that you have gotten some holes into the bottom. And then if you dig them down into the soil a little bit, it helps to keep them from getting so hot. But these have been a wonderful way to have container gardens that are very good producers. And especially if you have 2 tubs, you can be planting, you can be harvesting from one tub, and then when that's done, harvest from the next and replant for the next crop coming up. In the center, you see I've got my window box there, and I hate to waste water, so when I water the window box, it goes down into the box below. And so that's an easy watering trick. And that's, you can see those are my Swiss chard. They do beautifully in that location. Yeah, thank you. Pick easy crops. It's always important to have a reward, right? So don't go for things that are very difficult. Radishes are super easy. They don't take a long time. I know radishes can be on the bitter side, but if you've ever considered roasting radishes, they actually cook up like potatoes. And for those of us, like I, try to keep my carbohydrates low, roasted radishes get nice and sweet and can take the place of roasted potatoes. Are they exactly the same thing? No. But that's just like eating, what is it? Zucchini cut like noodles and calling that pasta. It's not pasta, okay? But it is a way to use zucchini in a really nice way, and then you have a nice sauce. So anyway, these are nice, they're rewarding. There are many different types of radishes that you can do. And then of course the greens are going to be bitter, but you can use those in salads. You can cook them up, you can steam them, and then that's just going to add more nutrients to the steamed greens that you have. This is just an example of all the edible flowers that you may find in your garden that maybe you didn't know, and those are wonderful in your salads. So here in the basket I have, we've got calendula, and I have some up here. They're in the marigold family, but they don't have that marigold flavor that can be a little bit perfumey. And then this is hibiscus. For those of you who have hibiscus, you can eat those petals. They're wonderful, very light. Lavender, of course. We have, this is, oh, I feel so badly. They're so wilted, but this is my, this is the, oh my gosh, the name just flew out of my head. Celosia. Did someone say that? Yeah. So it's in that family. Amaranth. Sorry. But the amaranth leaves are edible, and they do taste like lettuce. So you can have them low growing. There are many different species of them. These happen to get up to be about 7 or 8 feet tall, and you can be harvesting from them all season. And then if you're really good, you'll dry the flower pods, and they will they'll turn into little seeds, and you can use those. So it's a beautiful plant, and I love it in this color, but I also have volunteers of it in green. And then roses, all rose petals are edible, okay? So it just depends. Do they have flavor? If it's a heavily scented rose, yes, it will have flavor to it. But if it isn't, it'll just be another, lovely item that you can put into your salad. And of course we have marigolds. There's bee balm, this is harvesting now. In my gardens, it's got a minty lemony flavor to it, which is really nice in salads, but also for desserts. So you can, but do be careful. These are in the mint family, so I recommend that you watch them because they will jump around the garden. They spread very easily. Mint, I always, I take a large deep pot, I cut out the bottom, I bury that in the soil, and that's where I plant my mint, so it keeps it from spreading all over. So you might want to do the same with bee balm. But many different colors and varieties of that. And then,
Are they prone to worms or something, bee balm?
not that I've noticed. Yeah, they're pretty hardy herb, and also the leaves from bee balm, they have that minty lemony flavor. You can make tea.
May
You
I feel it,
Sure.
the bee balm?
Yeah, you can pass it around.
And hummingbirds like them.
Oh yes. Yep.
Because I got
Yeah, you
rid
can
of
pass
them
those around.
because I thought that was a problem.
Yeah. You can. Yeah. Now this is right here. This is the anise hyssop.
Yeah, just
This is a licoricey flavor, wonderful in desserts, but I've also found anything that you're cooking with fennel is really nice to have. These, the flowers, I just pick them off and kind of spread them in there. It's called anise hyssop. Again, you'll see it's got a square stem, so this is in the mint family, but this is a perennial. Which is lovely, and it grows beautifully tall, so it's a nice filler. This is more like licorice.
Oh,
Yeah.
now I do.
Now, yeah.
I feel like put it in your fingers.
Yes, go right ahead.
Put it in your fingers and then it comes out.
And then we're back to our greens and scallions and others. Now, I did bring a few things. Let's see. Oh, okay. I think this will come up next. Are any of you familiar with creeping Jenny? It's called, I think, money plants.
Is it like Creeping Charlie?
No, it's different. Yes, I have creeping Charlie, and that is edible also.
Oh, yeah.
But in the early spring, it's not quite so bitter. So by midsummer, I've pulled as much of it out as I can. But early spring, it's actually nice to take those petals.
Now this is called what?
This is called creeping Jenny, and so this is also edible. And I have it in a chartreuse color. I have it in different colors, and they grow all over. They're a wonderful ground cover, but the leaves are also edible. So a lot of these, like I'm sharing with you things from I do a program called Eat Your Weeds. So a lot of people may think of these as weeds, but what is a weed? A weed is just a plant that's in the wrong place in your garden, right? But if you can imagine when grocery stores were not common and you ate and preserved whatever you could grow on your property, during the summer when there were good greens out there, you harvested. So this is, I can't remember. You might recognize this. I have used this on sandwiches instead of sprouts. So this is, I can't remember if this is called hairy vetch. I'm trying to think if that's what the name of this is. But this is, I just pulled this weed right out and I'm like, oh yeah, this is something that I have eaten in the spring and can eat it now.
Now, when
Yeah.
you say you put them in your salads?
You're going to take them off, most often you're going to take the leaves off the stem, unless the stem is very
And then
tender.
if it doesn't have a smell or anything, it just.
It's
tastes
just like eating
creamy.
lettuce. Yeah. So, there's our creeping Charlie. So, edible weeds for your salads. So let's go through that. So, lamb's quarters. These are weeds that you often find in your garden. They can grow pretty tall. Again, I try to get them when they're young and they're more tender. The plantain. This is a very overlooked plant. This is actually an incredibly wonderful medicinal plant. If you have bug bites or bee sting, you just take one of these leaves, kind of crush it in your mouth, and then put it on, and it will almost immediately take the sting away, and you can wrap something around it, and it will help to heal. But the plantain often grows along the driveway. You may see it in a very dry area of your yard. It lies very flat on the ground most often. That is plantain. And then, of course, dandelions, we call those weeds, but the dandelion, the entire plant, is edible and is very good for you. Dandelion greens are some of the first early spring greens. They are considered a diuretic, but what they do is if we were living back when you ate what was available during the season, you've eaten all of your stores for the winter, and now come spring, you need to cleanse yourself, and so that's what dandelions are for. The dandelion flowers are wonderful. I've harvested those and stored them in vinegar, and then they make a dandelion vinegar, which is a lovely sweet scent, believe it or not. And then, of course, the roots are also edible, dried. People have used them in place of coffee. I don't know why you would do that, but you can.
And do these mostly come back every year?
These weeds, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
You don't ever
yeah.
have to plant them again.
No, we don't plant weeds, we find weeds. So that is a very important distinction.
Yes.
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, so, I passed around chickweed, not the hairy bittercress. So garlic mustard is something you'll find out in fields and stuff. The leaves do taste like mustard. Never bring this plant root home because it is very invasive. If you're going to harvest it, go ahead and harvest it out where you find it. Bring the leaves home, but don't bring the roots home. Chickweed, early spring weed, it is delightful. That's actually what's getting passed around in that little bundle. And then the hairy bittercress is also, I found I don't have a wet area, but I do get it in the spring, so I eat those. Now, when I'm not eating them, I may be taking them out and giving them to the chickens, so my chickens have a really wonderful diet of all these things that I'm not able to, eat because there's so much. Purslane. This is, no, that's not it. Here it is. Okay, so, again, I apologize for the wiltedness. This is fabulous. This is in the cress family, so it's going to have some snap to it and lemony flavor. I love to chop this up. I chop it up with the stems, put it in salads. It's often found in Indian cooking, sautéed in oil, and it's highly nutritious for you. So if you find purslane, it often grows in areas that have, no added nutrients to them. Don't pass it up. Give it a try. You may really enjoy it. Violets, we know that the flowers are edible, but the leaves themselves, it's free lettuce. This is why the rabbits, watch what your rabbits are eating. Watch what your groundhogs are. Well, your groundhogs are going to pass up all the bad stuff. They're going to go right for your good stuff. But rabbits will eat weeds. On the far right there, pineapple weed. That is a wonderful little weed. It really does have the sweet scent of pineapple, but also chamomile. So it is a member of the chamomile family. It doesn't get a true chamomile flower, but it is delicious. It's sweet right off the ground. So you can chew on that. It's like eating a berry. So I find those along my driveway most often. So let's talk a little bit about the edible salad garden on your plate. So lots of ways you can use it. So these are just some of the dishes that I've prepared over the years. This green here, that is a red-veined sorrel. That's a perennial. It will come back year to year. And here, I'll pass a little bit of that out. This got a little bit more sun than wanted, but this is going to be, sorrel is, you may be familiar with the green French sorrel, which is most often you may see it in a nice restaurant in a sauce or a soup in the spring. This red vein sorrel is a beautiful small mounded plant, really lovely in the garden, and you can harvest and it'll come back again and again and again. And then that's with some beets and a little bit of radishes. This was actually a plate that I did. Are any of you familiar with Food 52 online? Yeah, it's a wonderful website. They have a wonderful store. They share recipes that their readers submit, and some of them are really beautiful. I happen to go to a food photography class at their studios in Manhattan, which you can do if you're at all interested. And so we spent a whole day just styling plates. It was a lot of fun. This bottom area here, these I just included that. That is just a lot of different small vegetables. Now, as I mentioned to you before, preparing vegetables or growing vegetables that are difficult, it's just not in my wheelhouse. I, for whatever reason, cannot grow a really good tomato plant. Now, for some of you, you can do it, no problem. I struggle. So what I focus on are cherry tomatoes. I can do those really well. And so I grow a lot of cherry tomatoes and small little peppers. So that is a salad of those with some bread cubes and things like that. So combination, have a really good vinaigrette. If you want a really good vinaigrette dressing, go to my website at The Creative Feast. I have one that I just make a huge bottle of it and I keep it right on my counter. When you buy vinaigrettes, salad dressings from the grocery store, a couple things to remember. They most often will have preservatives in them. They use canola oil, which is not something you want to be using. That's highly inflammatory. You want to get rid of those highly processed oils. You want to stick with olive oil. Avocado oil is okay. If you're looking for a neutral oil, extra virgin olive oil is excellent, but move away from these canola oil, vegetable oil, seed oils. They're very processed. Their process is, I know for canola oil, it's a 12 to 18 step process, and it includes bleach. So I want to scare you because I'm going to scare you healthy. These are things that you don't want in your diet. Making your own salad dressing could not be simpler. Leave it. It's just vinegar, oil, and Dijon mustard. And I leave it on the counter so it doesn't solidify in the refrigerator. You don't need to refrigerate it. We've got vinegar in there that's going to keep it preserved. Oil will keep preserved. Just keep it out of the sunlight. So have that. Then you have a salad ready anytime you're hungry, right? And up here, these are, some of the salad greens that I took from the garden. I grow dill. Dill is called dill weed for a reason. It self-sows, but I never turn it away because I just love the flowers. And I just pluck off the bottom and, cut it down and it will grow back again. So I use that often during the summer. So sometimes it's just how we compose a plate, right? So this is all just placed rather than mixed. And then you've got, what I do is I will dress the vegetables together and then kind of put them on the plate so that they have the dressing on them. And then just put this all on the greens, including the eggs and the olives, which are good. We've got good fat, we've got good protein. You cannot, in my opinion, overdo eggs, okay? Because they have excellent protein and good natural fats, okay? So I know we're cautious about that. If you have questions about that, cholesterol is actually incredibly important to our brain function and to our bodies. So I'm sure the library has books. There are now books out that will help you to understand how important cholesterol, salt, all of these things are for your diet. Of course, consult your doctor if you have any questions, but I just want to make you aware that food science has opened up with people exploring how nutritionally packed these items are. And then tuna fish. That's a great source of protein. And for my ladies in the audience, I guarantee you are not eating enough protein. And that's why we tend to eat more of the other foods that we know are not really good for us, is because we're not eating enough protein. So finding sources of protein that you enjoy will really help you to feel more full and to eat less of the things that we don't like. I happen to be an intermittent faster. I've been fasting and teaching intermittent fasting classes for over 8 years. And I just love the lifestyle. It's given me an incredible amount of energy. What time is it? Is it 7:17? I've been fasting for 24 hours. So you can see the energy, the light, it just gives me more. Do I do that every day? No, I don't. But today I needed to do it because the problem is I drove to you. It was a 2-hour drive. If I had eaten before I drove, I would have fallen asleep. That happens, right? Because when we eat, our body is digesting, which is the most energy it needs, and it will do that first before anything else. So I put off the digestion, and I'm able to drive, and I'm going to drive home, and I'll be just fine. Okay? And then I'm going to go to bed. And then I won't be hungry, right? So anyway, I just like to, if you are interested, you can go to my website. There's information on intermittent fasting there, too. So
Are there any vitamins or anything in the flowers?
yeah, well, they'll have, because they have color, it's like eating carrots, right? Carrots have vitamins in those colors, so your flowers will too. You'd have to eat a heck of a lot of flowers to get a huge amount of nutrient value. But what I can say is, unless you're allergic to the flower, it can't hurt, right? And it adds, a level of fun to what you're eating.
So
Yes.
the purple vegetable that was sitting there was a
That's a potato.
potato. That's what I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can find these, now anywhere in the grocery store, which is fun. Yeah. And by the way, potatoes like this are just fine for you. It's when we eat them as French fries, potato chips, all of that. Okay, because think of the oils that are going. What oils are they using? Canola oil or vegetable oil, because it's inexpensive. We've moved away from tallow. If you are somebody who can get tallow, that's an amazing fat or oil that you should be using. Okay, so combining different greens with different vegetables. I love peas, and I always have multiple bags of frozen peas, because all you have to do is thaw them out. You don't actually have to cook them. And you can use them. They're a wonderful vegetable to use. And then those are mixed with a variety of greens and edible flowers. And it's always nice to have a little bit of shaved cheese. If you are concerned about eating a lot of cheese, some cheeses are packed with more flavor. So feta cheese, for example, is a hugely flavorful cheese. You don't have to eat a lot to get that flavor satisfaction. And oftentimes when you have that on your salad, what is it that really gets you? It's the salt in the cheese you love, and it is good for you, okay? Then here there are eggs back, so here's another way, poached eggs. And when you break those eggs, the yolk will then mix with your salad dressing to make a really wonderful finish for your salad, okay? And then here is just a bunch of different vegetables that I've just lined up right next to each other. A little bit of that feta cheese, those nasturtium flowers mixed in, and a vinaigrette on top. And that's it for that. But what I can do, I'd like to, we have just a few more minutes. We can take some questions, but I thought I would take you really quickly to my website. There we go. Okay. So this is my website, and then if we go down to where it says food and fun, this is my recipe blog, and you are going to find so many recipes from the classes. Once I went online, which was in 2020, every time I did a class, which was 3 to 4 times a week, I would add all of these recipes. So there's lots for you to see. You can also go to my different categories. So if we went to, let's take a look, let's do edible flowers. So here, cocktail, anybody? You can make a lilac syrup, right? In the spring, forsythia syrup, etc., and then on down the road. So there's plenty for you to find there. Also, remember I mentioned I do programs for AARP. I do have the recipes here. If you want them, you can go right, that's free and available to you. If you're interested in artisan bread in 5 minutes a day, have any of you done that? What? Okay, that was such the craze when the pandemic first hit. Do you remember you couldn't go to the grocery store and find flour? Right? It's because people were making this artisan bread in 5 minutes a day. It was crazy. It was crazy. And then intermittent fasting, as I mentioned to you, there's lots of information here for you, and you are always welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions. I so believe in it as a healthy way to eat. Low carb. Here are the chickens, so you can see that run. It's all laid out for you, and I do have the list of what we ended up using for materials too. So if you want that, that's all there. And then of course we go down to the edible gardens, and so you can do a little slideshow through that. And then if any of you are interested, we remodeled our kitchen about 20 years ago, so that remodel and the original is there. So lots of fun for you to check out. Are there any questions that I can answer for anybody? Yes?
What about teas, like hibiscus tea?
Right, so
Any recipes for that?
So the hibiscus tea, I believe that is from a certain kind of hibiscus flower that may be tropically based. Because have you ever had it and you notice it's very lemony and strong? I've not gotten that sense from my hibiscus. But I'm so happy you brought up the tea. So we tend to be under the impression that we have to dry our leaves for them to be tea. But you can do fresh leaf tea right away. You could make a mint tea tomorrow and enjoy it. Just be careful you don't over steep it, because the longer you steep it, the more bitter it will get. So keep that in mind. Anybody else have any questions?
Back to the very beginning of your talk,
Okay.
I'd like to know the definition of bolt, when things bolt.
Right. So when lettuce bolts, for example, or you may be very familiar with this for those of you who grow cilantro, right? You buy it, it comes in a nice plant, you plant it, and within a week it bolts. What it does is it's done giving you the leaves, and it sends up its flowers so that it can begin to make its seeds. Once it bolts, though, on its way to bolting, those leaves will become more bitter. Now, for those of you who love cilantro, the reason it bolts so quickly is you're buying a mature cilantro plant. It's best to plant cilantro from seed and treat it like lettuce. I grow it, cut it, it grows back, cut it, it grows back, and then eventually, like after 3 times cutting it, it's done. But you can replant cilantro over and over again. So, yeah, great question. Anybody else?
I cook my popcorn in canola oil, just Orville Rotterbox, so what do I change that to?
So I would change that to an avocado oil. You could use coconut oil, anything that can take a high heat.
Okay.
And actually, olive oil, I recently read, it can actually be cooked at a higher temperature than we've been told. So, yeah, but I would go with coconut oil would be great, because that is a high heat.
Because you put it in, how do you measure it? Just throw it in there, go with it.
Well, you can buy coconut oil that has been liquefied.
Okay.
I don't know much about that, so you could measure it that way. But, I mean, you're just doing a tablespoon anyway, and you put it in. Yeah, and that would be good. And if you buy virgin coconut oil, it may have a tint of the flavor of coconut, but I've not noticed that it changes a dish at all. Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Yep. Yes.
What about safflower oil?
So again, think of it this way. What they're doing is they're extracting oil from a little seed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That takes a lot of work to do that and a lot of mechanics to do it. So the crushing, every time you do that, you are changing the makeup of that seed and what it produces. Now, extra virgin olive oil is a great example. So extra virgin olive oil is pressed, cold pressed, and the first pressing is the extra virgin olive oil. So in fact, that is going to be the most nutrient value of an oil that you can take because they haven't heated it, they haven't multi-pressed it. Hopefully they've really cold pressed it, that's why it tends to be cloudy. When you buy extra virgin olive oil, it is in a dark green bottle to protect it from sunlight. Okay? Then they'll take those, after they've done their first press, they'll take those olives and pits again and they'll press them again. Those subsequent presses after become regular olive oil. So they still have a nutrient value to them. They're a little bit more processed, but they are not processed in the same way that canola oil is, which is, canola oil is Canadian oil. It's not even, it's made from rapeseed. And a lot of these seeds, they were throwaway. And so they found another use for them. Crisco was motor grease that they found after the war. They needed, what do we do with all of this? They managed to find a way to make it look like what? Lard. And they sold it to the housewife as a substitute. But Crisco oil is not...
It's $7. It's $7 for a little can.
Right. But you would be better, like when I make pie dough, I use butter. Because, or good lard. If you can get good lard, it's called leaf lard. It's from around the kidney. Harder to get at the grocery. I've not seen it at the grocery. You might find it in the freezer section at Whole Foods. You can order it online. But I use butter. You know, and a good grass-fed butter is gonna, be delicious. And it really makes a difference in your pastries. So, yeah. But I always recommend, I'm telling you what I've learned. I'm not a food scientist, but I have changed my diet to, remove all of these things. And in fact, the other best thing you can do is look through your cabinet and get rid of the things that are in boxes and crinkly packages. That's easy. You know what those are. You don't have to do a lot of thinking about it. But when you replace that with highly dense, thank you for coming. Dense, food that looks as close as it does to nature, then you're going to get more dense nutrients.
What's a crinkly example? Something crinkly.
Bag of chips. Yeah.
Cookies and boxes.
Yeah. So,
Okay, we're good.
but really, things like that. So, but I want to thank you all for coming this evening. I really appreciate your attention. Thank you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer.
Thank you very much.